You know what I've realized recently? Adulthood is actually not that bad. It's kind of fun. Yeah, so I don't know. Everyone always is like, ugh, adulthood. Ugh, when did I get so adult? When is adulting is so hard? But yeah, I mean, some of that's true. But recently I've been kind of feeling like, adulthood's not too bad. And there's some good benefits. And I don't know. I'm leaning into it. I think it's quite a fun experience. So let's break this down. I think there's like two areas I want to discuss today. One is the transition into adulthood. And I think the second is when you really start to enjoy adulthood and like what the sweet spot I think in adulthood is. I am now at a ripe age of 29, so I feel that I'm quite deep into adulthood now. Okay, actually I wouldn't say deep. I feel like I only like really transitioned into adulthood maybe 5 years ago. But I would say I am on the more mature side of adulthood now, and I'm really starting to experience like the benefits, which is kind of funny when you think about it. I'm like, my parents got married when they were like 24 and were building businesses and like buying houses, and we are just moving out here at a very slow, like a much slower pace, but I guess we were not thrust into adulthood so aggressively like our parents were, well, at least my immigrant parents who had to build a life for themselves. So grateful for that, thank you, and good for you, mum and dad, you strong people. So when we talk about transition into adulthood, I think it's quite interesting because when I think about it, I don't feel that there was like distinct moment where I felt I'm an adult, this is it. You know, you turn 18, you get your driver's license in Australia, you can drink, you're given all these responsibilities, but I don't also think that like that signifies in any sort of way that I was ready for adulthood / was an adult. Very much a child still. There's just definitely no way that I went from 17 to 18 and had all these access to all these vices and privileges and was somehow matured. So I think it's kind of funny that people like mark certain ages as a coming of age, like 21. Everyone had like their 21st birthday. Once again, not really sure why that was marked as the age. I think it's probably because America, they start drinking when they're 21. So that's probably start drinking in quotation marks when they're 21. So that's like their coming of age. But surely we're not attaching adulthood and a transition into adulthood with alcohol, because that would be interesting and kind of sad, guys. So let's just ignore that. Let's just ignore the idea of that. But yeah, I don't think when I look back at my early 20s or like my like adult teen years that I had a moment where I really felt I'm an adult now. I think I probably definitely, I mean, this is all in retrospect, but I do think probably at the time I felt I had a certain level of independence and maturity. But in terms of feeling like an adult, probably not really, didn't really quite grasp the full idea of that. So yeah, I think for me, I really started to slip in and step into adulthood. Maybe when I was 23, yeah, I reckon even 24 or 5, to be honest. And what's funny is I moved overseas when I was 22. Yeah, like middle of 22 years old of age. So, and graduated from university, 23. And it's funny because you think like at that age, when you're making these milestones, you think that you are like, you know, building your adult life. And actually you are, but you're not like really still where you think you could get to as an adult. But it's funny because at the time I think that you think it's such a big deal. And then it means so much and it's like huge steps. But it's just all, yeah, I guess if you put it that way, it's probably all just stepping stones towards adulthood. And so I think you can definitely, like, I think I definitely felt like when I was, you know, even when I moved away from home, I still felt like I was a child. Like, you know, I mean, not a child, but mum and dad were still like my main dependents, you know, and I still wanted to go home and hang out with them and spend my time with them. And it's funny because I think you can have all these like elements of independence of what you think you would have as an as an adult, but still not be an adult. And I also think it's kind of some beauty in that, like never quite growing out of your child. And because I think the child in you is kind of what keeps you alive and creative and some element of youth and energy. Not saying that when you're an adult, you're just like zapped of energy in life, but I definitely think you become more jaded over time. And yeah, I think that's quite interesting. So what I'm saying with this transition period is that I think that you can very much so have your driver's license and still be very dependent on your parents, have a job and still be very dependent on your parents and not really be an adult life. But I think about it and I think about like, what are the moment or indicators that really make you start to feel like you are an adult? I think for me, it was when I moved abroad. It was like, okay, you're thrusted into this area where you like this space where you have to be independent. You know, you have to have some sort of self-drive to get you up and do things, work, study, whatever it is. Like there's no one around kind of either chasing you up or like keeping you accountable. And then I think also when you get a job and your job is like more senior, I feel like that's really interesting. I think that's the moment when you're like, honestly, sometimes I sit there and you're like, me? Really? I know things? I'm making like decisions on these things? Are we sure? But I think that's a space when you start to kind of gain confidence as an adult and experience to progress yourself to being a better participating adult in society. And then I think also when you start to like earn money and save money, I think like that's when you also start to feel like an adult, because you start to be able to have the room to make decisions for yourself and play a bit. So let's talk about the second piece then a little bit more, which is when is that sweet spot in adulthood? Like when do you really start to enjoy yourself? And I think that I'm kind of at the start / I reckon I'm in the first third of my enjoying adulthood phase. And I'm going to preface this by saying I actually think that adulthood is most enjoyed in this period before kids and after you've started kind of having this first established moment in your life. And I put established in air quotes with my fingers. So no hate to kids, but I think everyone has to admit that like a child costs a lot of money to raise. And so when you do look at starting a family and having kids, if you're not like a bajillionaire or multimillionaire, it is to a degree like a burden, right? Because financially a burden, because it is money that you need to start putting aside for your kids, saving more money, earning more money, finding ways to have more income come in so you can give the best life you can for your kids and also yourself at the same time. So I do think that before kids is probably a sweeter adulthood space because you have this level of selfishness where you can just think about yourself. And honestly, I think that's the space I'm in right now. And it's a very like fun space to be in, but mildly addictive and hard to let go of. Like sometimes I think about the idea of having kids, I'm like, like, you know, you could easily just go on in this space where you everything you decide is for yourself. You don't really have to think about anybody else. And yeah, it's a very enticing place to be, and it does make you think it does make me think anyway, honestly, about like, should I have kids? Do I want kids? But I think that all comes down to like your lifestyle and what you want long term. And that's why I think that this sweet spot in adulthood isn't a forever thing, or it can be if you want, but I think it's capped to like a certain area. And the jury is still out on whether or not I'm having kids, so we'll discuss that. Maybe we'll discuss that one day. I'm not sure. We'll think about it. So the other thing that I said was around, but after you're more established. And when I say established, I think this comes in many shapes and sizes, different forms. It depends on like what your goals are in life. But I do think there's a relative amount of establishedness coming from financial stability or like a financial moment in your life. For example, maybe you now make a good salary in your based on your terms, or you are able to travel independently. You know, you're able to buy those clothes that you want to buy without really thinking too hard about the budgeting. You're able to buy a house, buy a car, have like savings, you know, invest into things. I think that a financial milestone is quite often attached with being established, because we live in a capitalist society. So if you want to have freedom, it's kind of got to be attached to financial stability in some shape or form, unless you are out there living as a caveman somewhere and living off the land and being self-sufficient. Good for you. Hit me up, teach me if you want. Would love to learn a little bit of that. But yeah, essentially that's what I'm defining as established. And I think this period of between being your first space where you really feel established before having kids is a great place to be, because as I was saying before, you only need to think about yourself. Like, you can wake up in the morning and you have like your stresses, your to-do list, but fundamentally, like, you just get to choose what you want to do because it's for you. You don't really, I mean, yeah, you care about the person who employs you and you care about like your friends and family, but beyond that, like, you don't have children or things to harvest and care for. Even on top of that, I think also a sweet spot is like before you have liabilities, like financial liabilities, like buying a house. So maybe you're just earning a really good income and you've invested into some really great shares, but you haven't gone ahead and bought like a house, or you haven't bought like, you know, or built a company and invested money into that and taken like financial risks in that space. That is also, I think, a great area as an adult. But yeah, I think personally, I've been feeling a lot of satisfaction from this adult period in my life when I've been traveling. I've been traveling quite a lot and being able to have, you know, I need to be here for X, Y, Z. I need to be there for somebody else. I need to go visit a friend for this. I want to go explore this country. And been able to have that financial freedom and just like book that ticket as I please, because it's my own hard-earned money and like I've worked for it, is very satisfying. And very fulfilling. I guess it's because you're in choice and you feel like you have the power to dictate your life and that you're not just a rat in a race. I think that's where I'm feeling like very satisfied from being an adult. And so I guess I think about like, how do you maintain that state? You know what I mean? Like, how, when you do at some point transition from this fun adult stage into maybe the more responsible adult stage, or like more, I don't want to say this word, it sounds like negative, but more burdened adult stage, where you have more liabilities and you're focusing on like long-term growth of things. So maybe you buy a house so that you can, maybe you buy a house or two, maybe you invest into something, maybe you start a business because you're trying to look to the future and build a long-term foundation, a long-term life for yourself. How can you continue to sustain the fun element of being an adult? And I think that is a space that I don't have all the answers for, and I think I'll learn as I go and transition further into that space and learn more about how to balance that. And I honestly think maybe it's not as scary and like intimidating as it sounds, or doesn't have such negative connotations as I may attach to it in my mind. I think I sometimes forget that like generally your wealth is always accruing. You know, like if you're working a job, even if you're working the same company, there is going to be progression. Your salary will increase, like you will continue to gain and make more monies, which means that your circumstances and your access to things can change, and it's not like you lose the financial freedom. It may actually grow in correlation with how your life grows at the same time. And so I think that's something that I forget sometimes. But in saying that, one of the things I fear sometimes in life is the big what if. You know, I think right now when I look at my life, I'm like, oh, I could never imagine not being friends with like all of these friends that I've been with for like 10 plus years, right? Or being as close to my sister as I've always been, or having Alex in my life and our relationship being stable, or having, being in a good financial place like I am now. Sometimes, when you're in the present and you look to the future, you think, oh, like I could never see how it could go so wrong, or like what could be the trigger. And I think that scares me sometimes, because I used to work in debt collecting when I was in my university years, before I was in my fun adult phase, before I was an adult. And that was a really great eye-opening role, because I learned so much about like the different positions people get into unexpectedly, and the reality of when someone falls into that position, and whether or not they've like set aside money to support themselves in the situation, or have the resources to support themselves, like insurance, or some sort of like savings fund, or some sort of support in some shape or form. And from observing that, I think in most cases, like people didn't have that. And that was a really good like eye-opening experience for me, because it did make me realize and be very tapped into the reality that it could happen to anyone at any time. And I think that's why I have this idea and fear in my mind about, I don't know what could happen in the future, and I don't know what could come down the line that could kind of destruct the kind of present state I'm in and how I am now. And because I worked at the call center, I feel like I think it's inevitable. I think something will come up in some shape or form. Like, you can't control health in your body as much as you try to be like super healthy and manage yourself. If you get cancer, you get cancer, right? Like, there's not really much that I can do to prevent that if it's gonna happen anyway for some genetic reason. So I think those are the things that that scare me in that adult life, in the future context. And that's where I would say like the adult fun life isn't really sustainable. But anyway, I think I went a little bit off topic there, sharing my fears of deep adulthood once I get into that very dark, deep blue sea. But I think it's a funny podcast for me to make, because I do think that I'll look back at this when I'm like 40 and be like, lol, why were you like this? But also I might look back and say, she had a lot of wisdom for her age at 29. She prepared for the right things. She was mentally aware of what could come down the pipeline. And it's good she had the awareness. But who knows? We can't predict the future. So I guess I'll have to keep podcasting till I'm 40. Yeah, I don't mind. That would be a fun little like capsule throwback. So we'll consider that. Anyway, so if you are, 16, 17, 18, early 20s, and you're thinking, I know everything about the world, I'm so informed, you're not. You have so much to learn. But also, my PSA to you is that like adulthood is quite fun, Stay with it, stick with it. Your dark, like angsty times and periods that you're going through now will settle. You will become more stable, and you'll realize that there's a lot to enjoy about life. And when you gain a space of independence, there is a lot the world can offer you. So look forward to that time, and don't rush it. Take your time, because youth is also a very fun space to be in. I would love to hear about what you guys consider being, the space when you became an adult. And do you find adulthood fun? Would love to hear your thoughts. I think I just had this moment of reflection and thinking I sounded like a really old lady just then, speaking to the young'uns about staying in good spirits, about getting into adulthood. But all I have to say is, I think being an adult's fun. I've really enjoyed it so far. I'm having a really good time. And I'm going to stay in this sweet spot for as long as I feel is necessary. And I may or may not transition out of the adult fun life. But I think it's inevitable. But I hope that the fun stays in my adult life consistently, and I figure out how to maintain it. If you have any tips as an adult on the mature end of the spectrum, fill us in. Let us know. What can we do to prepare for life? Or should I just, be ignorant to it and just roll with it? Okay. Thanks for listening to the pod. Bye.